there! My name is Audrey Wilson, and welcome back to my fantasy world. Last week, I posted on my blog, audreybwilson.com/blog, that it was Chinese New Year, and I definitely recommend going to see that. It was a really fun blog to research, especially the cultural traditions. Again, I will say I am not an expert in the field, so take what I put out there with a grain of salt, do your own research, because I put in a search and dug up as much detail as I could find. Now, if anyone out there has any additions to that blog, please don't forget to email me, or you can leave a comment. Or if you are from that culture, you can tell me what your traditions are. I would love to hear about them. I love studying cultures, and I would love to hear from you. I will be reading some of the less popular poetry of hers because, let's face it, the poet herself did many, many, many readings of her more famous poetry, and I have left a link in the description below to her reciting 2 different poems, which I'll get into a little bit later. Before I get into it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Check out the blog and my works on audreybwilson.com. Sign up for beta reading, and follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Links in the description below. Now, the reason I love Maya Angelou so much, and why I decided to make a tribute to her as my post for Black History Month, is because she's just amazing, and her poetry is amazing. She has done so much in her life, and when I think of Black History Month, she is the first person that I think of, aside from kind of more obvious choices. So I definitely wanted to make a tribute to her, even though she did not write any fantasy or sci-fi or anything like that. She did write from the heart, and it's something that I try to put into my writing. And aside from all that, she had just such a wisdom to her that anytime I saw her on screen or heard her voice, I felt the wisdom just oozing off of her. And honestly, if I had a chance to go back in time and meet her, I absolutely would, and I would be ecstatic. She is probably one of my favorite authors, poets of all time in general, for like anything. I love her so, so much. So let me get into a brief history of her life, and then I'll get into the readings themselves. Maya Angelou was born April 4th, 1928 in St. Louis, Missouri, and she was named Marguerite Johnson. Eventually, she would gain the childhood nickname of Maya, and eventually she would marry a Greek man and change her last name to Angelou, which is a shortened version of her ex-husband's name, but that's not important. She made it her own. At 8 years old, she stopped speaking because she thought her voice had gotten a man killed, and she didn't speak again for 5 years except to her brother. He was the only person that she would speak to in that 5 years. And what's really sad about this particular story is that the man was her mother's boyfriend who had raped her. The man had been sentenced after her testimony in court, and 4 days after his release was found dead. She seemed to believe he was killed by her uncles, which is somewhat implied in her memoirs. She and her brother would live in Arkansas with their grandmother until World War II, when Angelou moved to California to study dance and acting at California Labor School. Throughout her life, Angelou pursued singing, acting, dancing, and, of course, writing. She was even part of the Harlem Writers Guild, which included Louise Meriwether, Terry McMillan, and John Henrik Clarke. One of her most famous books is her 1969 I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. She received many nominations, including a Tony and an Emmy in 1973 and 1977, respectively, and then won the Grammy for Best Spoken Album for her 1993 inauguration reading of her poem On the Pulse of Morning. She spent some time in the 60s in Africa as an editor and freelance writer. She was a civil rights activist and worked with both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. One of her most famous poems is also one of my favorites, Still I Rise. And I have a link in the description so you can hear her read it. Her voice is so beautiful, strong, and melodic, and it is just an amazing read, and definitely when you hear her voice, you can hear the power in it. Unfortunately, Maya Angelou died May 28th, 2014, and she was, to the last, a beautiful woman, so wise and full of experience. Again, if I could go back in time and meet her, I absolutely would. Maya Angelou has a lot of famous poetry, but today I'm going to focus on her less famous ones. If you want to hear the famous ones, she reads many of them herself, and I can't do them justice like she does. Still I Rise and On Pulse of Morning is in the description below. Definitely check out those links. Now let's talk about Maya Angelou's poetry specifically. She has a lot of poetry books out there, and I have her complete works of poetry sitting right there. But as I said before, I'm going to be going into her less famous ones because, let's face it, most of the famous ones she read herself out loud and for everyone to hear. And I have links in the description below to Still I Rise and On Pulse of Morning. So definitely check those out. But I think that some of her less famous poetry is also very beautiful and very amazing. So I'm going to feature those today. And honestly, she has a lot of famous poetry because she was just that prolific. So
and watch my children
definitely
blooms
go check out
above
the
the weeds of death.
and also
Their petals wave, and still nobody knows the soft black dirt that is my winding sheet. The worms, my friends, yet tunnel remembering. Soft gray ghosts crawl up my sleeve to peer into my eyes, while I within deny their threats and answer them with lies. Mush-like memories perform a ritual on my lips. I lie in stolid hopelessness, and they lay my soul in strips, and find me where I wait.
Maya Angelou's work,
I only need to
poetry,
fertilize their birth.
How
I lie
in
down
just
in my grave
brief
and watch
and
my
short
children.
poem, she can put so much power behind the words. A poem, even as short as Remembering, gives me a slight chill up my spine. And actually, it may not have anything to do with the poem itself, but this kind of brings me back to some of my more embarrassing moments in life, but it kind of just reminds me that it's time to let them go. And even though in the poem it doesn't actually say that precisely, it does show how something like those memories can tear at you, and it's kind of a reminder that it's in your own mind. So, yeah, I think part of the point is to make you feel that and to understand that that is, one, it's okay to feel, but it's also best to let them go. Elegy for Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. I lie down in my grave and watch my children grow, proud blooms above the weeds of death. Their petals wave, and still nobody knows the soft black dirt that is my winding sheet. The worms, my friends, yet tunnel holes in bones, and through those apertures I see the rain. The sun-felt warmth now jabs within my space,
and brings me roots of my children born. Their seeds must fall and press beneath this earth, and find me where I wait. I only need to fertilize their birth. I lie down in my grave and watch my children grow. One of the reasons why I wanted to read Elegy for Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass is because it highlights two of the most famous people that brought about the destruction of slavery. Harriet Tubman, if you don't know, was a leader of the Underground Railroad, which brought slaves from the southern states to northern free states and basically made them free people. And Frederick Douglass was a slave who learned to read. I can't remember who exactly taught him how to read, but it was against the law at the time for a slave to learn how to read. But he learned to read, he escaped slavery several times, and eventually, of course, he remained free, and he became friends with Abraham Lincoln and Mark Twain / Samuel Clemens, and he began writing narratives and exposing what slavery really was to people who didn't really know what the deal was, which obviously nowadays we absolutely know what was the problem, but people were very closed-minded back then as far as about the topic of slavery. So he definitely brought about people understanding what they were fighting for, and it definitely is something that influenced things throughout history all the way up until and through the civil rights movement and currently today. So Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass are two very prominent historical figures that are celebrated this time of year. And honestly, I think they should be celebrated more than just this time of year. So definitely check out stories of Harriet Tubman and also read the slave narratives that Frederick Douglass wrote, because they are really incredible, and it's definitely something that gives you a lot of sympathy and understanding of what history was like for people at the time. They're two of my favorite historical figures of all time, so definitely check that out. Now, this next one is one that my Angelou has read and recorded, believe at least once, but it is one of my favorites, and I love listening to it. I will leave a link in the description below to her reading it, of course, but I couldn't go through this video without talking about at least one of my absolute favorites. While I do like the other poems that are in this video as well, and they deserve as much attention as all of her famous poetry, I wanted to put this one in. It's just a beautiful poem, as usual, and I couldn't go through this video without doing this. In and Out of Time, for Jessica and Colin Johnson, Stephanie and Guy Johnson. The sun has come out, the mists have gone. We see in the distance our long way home. I was yours to love, you were always mine. We have belonged together, in and out of time. When the first stone looked up at the blazing sun, and the first tree struggled from the forest floor, I loved you more. You were the rhythm on the head of the conga drum, and the brush of palm on my nut-brown skin. And I loved you then. We worked the cane and cotton fields. We trod together the city streets. Wearied by labor, bruised by cruelty, strutting and sassy to our inner beat. And all the while, Lord, how I love your smile. You freed your braids, gave your hair to the breeze. It hummed like a hive of busy bees. I reached into the mass for the honeycomb there. God, how I loved your hair. You saw me bludgeoned by circumstance, injured by hate and lost to chance, legs that could be broken, but knees that would not bend. Oh, you loved me then. I raked the heaven's belly. With torrid screams I fought to turn nightmares into dreams. My protests were loud and brash and bold. My, how you loved my soul. The sun has come out, the mists have gone. We see in the distance our long way home. I was yours to love, and you were always mine. We have belonged together in and out of time.
Now, this poem was actually featured in Tyler Perry's Medea family reunion, where Maya Angelou actually played one of the members of the family. Even if you don't like the Medea movies, at least check out the clip that she recites this in. And, of course, there is also another clip in the description of her reading this. So definitely check that out. It's a beautiful, beautiful poem. I tend to like love poetry, so this is one of the reasons why I love this one. So I hope you noticed a few of the quotes that have been going through the pictures and stuff. A lot of them are quotes from Maya Angelou herself, from some of her poetry, and just things in general that she has said in the past. One of the reasons why I've been doing that is because I love the pieces of wisdom that she has. One of my first experiences with a quote from Maya Angelou was in my 11th grade English class. My teacher always put a quote on the board, and we had to interpret it. So that was always one of my favorite things to do, and it was one of the first ones that we ever did was a Maya Angelou quote. So I actually still have that quote book somewhere in all my stuff because we had to write down the quote and then what it meant and, you know, all that kind of stuff. It was definitely a great exercise in interpretation. So if you ever get a chance to do something like that, I definitely recommend. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, please, please check out the links below and listen to Maya Angelou read her own poetry, because her voice brings so much more meaning to the actual poetry. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you enjoy her work. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Go visit my website, audreybwilson.com, for blogs and works. And please sign up for the newsletter and for beta reading. Until next time.